Hey, all. Today we are going to talk about simplifying radicals, and we are going to talk about simplifying square roots as well as cubed roots. And so, this symbol that you see on all of these problems right now, those are called square roots. You probably have some experience with square roots, but a square root is just, excuse me, an operation like addition or subtraction, multiplication or division. Um, Addition means we're putting things together. Subtraction means we're taking them apart. Square rooting something is asking, what number did I multiply by itself to get this number? Sometimes we have these things called perfect squares, where we just have a perfect number that multiplies by itself to make this thing that's underneath the square root. But most of the time, it doesn't work that way. And so I'm going to show you a strategy for simplifying a square root, like the square root of 150, using Desmos. So you should pause now and make sure you have Desmos open, and then we're going to set ourselves up to figure out what is the simplified version of the square root of 150. So here I set up a table, and in that table I put 1 through 10, and I squared them all. So 1 squared, 2 squared, 3 squared. And then up here where it says y1, I'm going to delete that y1, and let's do this here. I'm going to take that 150, and I'm going to divide it by x1. Now, when we're together next, I can explain how I decided to do that. But if you remember just the process, we're taking the number we're trying to simplify underneath that square root and dividing by this first column, x1. And so some of them are going to be nice numbers, some are going to be decimals. What I'm trying to look for is the row where I have the nice number that's not a decimal that is smallest. So right here. So this actually means that 150 is the same thing as 5 squared times 6. So I'm going to rewrite my radical as the square root of 5 squared times 6. And so in math, we have opposite operations. Adding and subtracting are the opposites. Multiplying and dividing are opposites. Well, square rooting and squaring, that power of 2, that exponent of 2, those are opposite operations. So actually what I can do now is I can take this 5 squared and I'm going to move it outside of the square root. And when I do that, the squared is going to come off of the 5, and I'm just going to have 5. And then underneath my square root is still going to be that number 6. And that is my simplified version of the square root of 150. Now, to be honest with you, there's a lot of why that I'm skipping over here. Like, why does all of this work? But for now, let's just focus on practicing this process of trying to simplify the radical. And one thing I should say is we should always start by trying to square root the number. And you can, if you watch me there, you can actually type in, oops, SQRT, and it'll give you the square root symbol. And then I would do 150. And you can see that I got a decimal. And so that means, okay, I've got to go do this process with my table. If I look at number 3, 144, if I tried to square root 144, that gives me a nice number. The square root of 144 is 12. That's as simple as it gets. I don't have to do the other process. So it's always a good idea to check to see, can you actually square root that number and get something that's not a decimal? Let me try 72. So I'm going to come back up here. And if you keep the same table for every problem, you can just go change that top number. And now I'm going to look to find the smallest, nice, not decimal number in this right column that's here. So that means 72 is 6 squared times 2. So I'm going to rewrite this as 6 squared times 2. And so this can come outside of the square root symbol. The 2 has to stay under there. This 2 has to stay under there. And when 6 squared comes outside of the square root symbol, it loses its squared. It loses its exponent. And so the square root of 72 simplifies to be 6 square root 2. I'll do one more. I'll do 48. Again, if we just keep this table in there, I can just go ahead and type in the next number on top of that fraction. And I can see down here, 3 is the smallest number in this right column that is not a decimal. And so that means 48 is the same as 4 squared times 3. And one more time, I'm going to pull this 4 squared out of the square root. And when it's coming out of the square root, it's going to lose its exponent of 2. And it's just going to be 4. And then that 3 is staying underneath the square root symbol. That's my simplified version. And just so you know that 4 square root 3 is 4 times square root 3. So if I do 4 square root 3, it should give me the same decimal as if I just did the square root of 48. Okay, they are the same number. I've just written it differently. I've written it in a simpler way. So what I want you to do right now is I want you to pause, and there should be 6 more of these problems here for you to do. I want you to go do those 6 problems right now. Check your answers with my answer sheet. Ask me for help if you're stuck. And then once you've done those 6 problems, I want you to press play because we're going to turn this page over and we're going to talk about simplifying cube roots. So pause now and finish those problems on that page. Okay, so if you're back listening to me right now, that means you have 1 through 10 done. You have all those square roots simplified. You've checked your answers to make sure you've done them right, and you've asked for help when you got stuck or you got one wrong. Because now we're going to talk about doing cubed roots. These are the little square root symbols with the 3 outside. That little 3 is saying, hey, we want to know what number did we multiply 3 times to get negative 250. And so, again, I would recommend before you try to do the simplification method, just see if it works right away and becomes a simplified version that's not a decimal. And so I'm going to do cube root, so CBRT. And I'm going to type negative 250 in there. And it's going to give me a decimal. And so I know I've got to do the process. So I've done 1 through 10 to the 3rd power this time. Since it's a cube root, it matches that number outside. And then again, I'm going to go in here and get rid of x1 or y1. And I'm going to take the number I'm trying to cube root, negative 250, and I'm going to divide it by x1. And so one more time, I am going to go look for the smallest number in this right column that is not a decimal. So negative 250 is the same as 5 to the 3rd power times negative 2. We'll write that down. And so much like with a square root and an exponent of 2, a cube root and an exponent of 3 are opposite operations. They cancel. So I can pull that 5 with the exponent of 3 out of the cube root. And when it does that, the exponent goes away. It's a bit like when I move something from one side of the equal sign to the other, it changes its operation. When I'm taking that power out of the cube root, it's losing its exponent. So this 5 is going to come out here and just become 5. I'm also going to pull the negative out of there. That negative can come out. And then I'll have 2 left over underneath. Let me do that next one. I'm going to do a couple. I'm always going to check to see if this works out nicely. It doesn't. It's a decimal, so I got to move on to this process. Change this to negative 384. And again, I'm going to look for the smallest number in the right column. That's not a decimal, so that's that -6. So negative 384 is 4 to the third power times -6. I can bring this out of the cube root. When it comes out, it loses its exponent. So 4 to the third power, 4 with an exponent of 3, turns into 4. I'm going to bring that minus sign out here too. And then the 6 has to stay underneath the cube root. And that is my simplified version. So just so you know, we also have perfect cubes. So there are going to be a few that when I type in here, so number 4 is 512. That gives me a nice non-decimal answer. That means my final answer is just 8. So you should always check to see that, to see if it has like a nice non-decimal answer first, because then it saves you the trouble of putting it into the table and having to sort it out that way. But if you get a decimal, we've got to use the table as our strategy to try and simplify the cube root or the square root. So what I want you to do now is I want you to finish those questions. There's 7 of them. Make sure you're checking your answers with me. Make sure if you get one wrong or you're stuck or this was just too confusing, make sure you ask for help right away so that you can fix mistakes and figure this out. Do your practice, take your time, and good luck.